And
let's see. I don't know if it's just my screen. Is it frozen?
oh
Is it
no,
just
no, I
me?
hope not.
Oh no. Do you see me? Wait.
Let's see.
Hmm.
It might be my screen.
It's okay as long
There
as,
we go.
okay. Oh, I see me. Can everyone see me? Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon. Hello. Oh, great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Loaf Cake class. I'm so happy to see all of you here. We have people from all over the country today. California, Chicago, Texas, Pennsylvania, all over the place. I'm in New Jersey, New York City. Oh, I used to live in New York City. I miss it all the time. But my name is Katie, for those I haven't met. I'm a pastry chef, and also I get to teach these great baking classes here with Michaels, which is always so much fun every week. So it's always lovely to see you guys. And we have some people baking along today. If you're new to these classes, so you can bake along. I usually have some swap outs along the way, so we don't truly bake everything from start to finish most of the time. But you're welcome to bake along, or else this posts to YouTube about 48 hours or sometimes less on the Michaels channel on YouTube. So you can always go back and grab the recipe and bake at your leisure. But today we're making loaf cakes, which is so much fun. And we called it Spring Fling loaf cakes because there's some like fun spring flavors in there, but these can really be made into any flavor that you like. Somebody was asking in the chat if these could be made into different flavors. Absolutely. This is a great just base vanilla cake that you can turn into all sorts of flavors. And we'll talk about that as we go on. And also I threw a buttercream recipe in there just to kind of like top it off a little bit. But we're going to make a glaze as well, like a classic loaf cake glaze, and just keep it really simple and have some fun. But it is a great opportunity to get creative for sure. And howdy from Texas. Hi from South Carolina. Amazing. So cool. So Martina, when you're ready, you can come down, take your time, but come down and I'll show you what ingredients I have. This is her third class with us. So welcome to Martina. But so I've got some really basic ingredients here. Now, this is almost like a pound cake. Pound cake typically, traditionally you would have equal parts like fat, sugar, eggs, flour. So this is kind of a lighter version of a pound cake, more of a loaf cake, a classic, like a quick bread kind of style. But I am working with butter, and today I just happen to have salted butter. I think the recipe is calling for unsalted butter, if I remember what I used when I tested. So if you're working with salted butter like me, you can kind of cut down on the additional salt added a little bit there. But otherwise, I've got butter, I've got cream cheese. These are both at room temperature, so they'll be easy to cream. I've got 2 eggs. You'll notice I'm making a half batch because I already made 4 loaf cakes earlier, and there's only so many loaf cakes that one person can eat in a day. Uh, but if you're looking at the recipe, you'll see about, I think it's 1.5 sticks of butter, 4 eggs. So I'm having it today. My eggs are at room temperature as well, just so they kind of mix in a little bit easier. But they don't have to be. If you only have cold eggs, that's fine too. If you can let them stand at room temperature for about 10 minutes or so, they'll emulsify even more easily into your fat, so that can be very helpful. I've got granulated sugar. Talk about changing things up. You could swap this for light brown sugar. You could do dark brown sugar, anything you like. Oh, yeah. And actually, Martina, can you share the recipe when you can in the chat? She will upload that for you guys if she can. Give her 1 second on that.
Yes, I uploaded it.
Yes.
If you just scroll all the way up to the start of the class, it's right there as a
Maybe
PDF.
do it one more time just for
Of
funsies.
course.
If you can, that would be
Yes.
awesome. Okay. I've also got vanilla bean paste, which everybody knows is my favorite thing, if you guys have been in classes here before. But you can either use vanilla bean paste, you can use vanilla extract. We'll talk about different flavorings you can use as well. Any extract that you love, it could be almond, it could be lemon. We'll talk about fresh ingredients you can add in. All of that is good. I've got a little bit of salt. I've got all-purpose flour. And that is it for my cake situation. So very simple. Oh, there we go. She just shared it in the chat, so you guys can grab it there. Then for my buttercream, I've got butter, same deal, room temperature butter, so that's going to whip up nice and easy. I've got confectioner's sugar and milk. We'll talk about different options with this as well, but this is just a classic American style buttercream, really simple and easy. And then I thought I would do a glaze on some. So for glaze, I have 2 ingredients today. I have confectioner's sugar and I have lemon juice because we're just going to make a lemon glaze. This lemon juice could be swapped for milk. You could add vanilla, make it a vanilla glaze. But that's just a really simple and easy glaze that you could use to top your cooled loaf cakes. Yeah, I love almond extract too. It's funny. I'm funny about almond extract. Sometimes I really love it, and sometimes it's just like too floral for me. It depends on the quantity, I think. But we're going to get started. So the most important thing we've got here today is this mini loaf pan. And this is from Michael. So it has like 8 little vessels here. And they're so cute and fun. And they make these just little mini style loaf cakes. So one recipe is going to make 8 loaf cakes. I will say my loaf cakes tend to dome a bit. And we'll talk about this later. It could make up to 10 loaf cakes if you like a lower loaf cake. So if you're baking along, just note that. But it will make 8 as well, but it's a really nice loaf pan to have on hand, and we're going to turn this into all different flavors, so we'll have like a nice variety pack of mini loaf cakes to have on hand. So we're going to get started. So I've got a stand mixer here. Now, if you have a handheld mixer, that would be fine too. And this is a really quick and easy mix. This comes together in like 2 shakes. I'm going to add in my softened butter, and I'm going to add in my softened cream cheese as well. And we're just going to mix these to combine, a simple creaming method here. You can also throw in your sugar at this stage. And we're just going to beat this up until it's nice and smooth. I'm just going to turn my mixer on low-ish. I gave my mixer a really good workout the other day, and he started like groaning a little bit, and I'm a little worried about it. So if you see my mixer get swapped out at some point, I may have overdone it. This mixer's been with me for so long. Brown sugar would be the same amount, but you will want to pack it. So instead of the 1.5 cups of granulated, you could do 1.5 cups of packed light brown or 1.5 cups of dark brown. That would work perfect. All right, so we're just mixing that up so it's nice and smooth. Looking pretty good. At this point, you could give it a scrape just to make sure everything is nice and combined at the base of the bowl. We're not going to lose out on any of that good stuff. And I do love the cream cheese in the mix because the cream cheese really just adds like this tanginess, kind of balances the sweetness of the cake. It gives it like a little bit more complexity. So that's a lot of fun. And yes, you can use a cupcake pan. You could use this cake recipe for a classic loaf cake if you have like a standard loaf pan. But you can absolutely use it for cupcakes as well. I would probably fill them about 2/3 of the way up. And you do want to spray your cupcake pan, or if you're going to use liners, that would work also. But yeah, that'd be really cute. They will be a little bit denser than your classic vanilla cupcakes. So just to note that it's a little bit more of that loaf cake heaviness. So I'm going to add 1 egg in at a time. Just give it a mix. Poor mixer. I'm so sorry. And we're just combining. So as soon as you're smooth, you can go ahead and add the next one right in. Beat it up the same way. It's funny, Sandy. Yeah. Sandy was asking about if I've used the silicone cupcake liner forms. I'm not a big fan, I have to say. I never find a good way to use those. They're just like they're a little tricky. I don't know. By the time you unmold those cupcakes, I feel like you've like beaten them up a little bit when you're using those molds. They'd be fun for things that you would like freeze, I would think. All right, so I'm going to lob in my vanilla bean paste. Now, at this stage, if you want to add any other flavorings, whether we talked about different extracts you could use. You could also use spices. You could add in things like lemon zest or orange zest. You could add, let's see, dried lavender. You could add like anything you want. At this stage, you can go ahead and add that in. I'm going to add my salt also, and my flour and my baking powder. And I'm just going to beat to combine. I'm not going to overmix it. Like we've talked about before, it's always good. As soon as you add any dry ingredients into the bowl, that's when you should really be careful about how much you mix your batter, because that's the stage you could really build up gluten and sort of end up with a more rubbery result than what you would be aiming for. And how much flavoring would I add? You know, it's tricky. That's the fun of baking, I will say. The difference between baking and cooking, of course, like we don't want to be like tasting this as we go, although I definitely do taste as I go a little bit. But in terms of flavorings, and Jane, before we get into the shredded carrots, just in terms of flavorings, like pure like extracts and things like that, I would say depending on the strength of what you're using, like if I'm adding, let's say like a teaspoon of vanilla, I'm probably only adding a quarter teaspoon of almond extract because it's so much stronger. Same with lemon extract and things like that. If I'm adding spices, you know, start with like a quarter teaspoon, a half teaspoon. If you don't mind giving it a tiny bit of a taste, you go ahead and taste it. You could also put like a little bit in like a microwave safe container and just pop it in the microwave to taste your cake batter before you bake the whole thing. That's a fun, quick way to kind of test it without eating raw batter. You could definitely do that as well. But I would say it's always good to start with less and kind of build it up from there. And we will talk about mix-ins in a minute. So no mix-ins at this point, only flavorings. That's it. All I did was beat it up just to combine. And if you have anything running around the sides of the bowl, just use your scraper to kind of scrape it in. And that's it. Nice and smooth, not overworked, just ready to go. Now, this is the time you can make so many different options. Jane was asking about carrots. Uh, Vicious Glitter, what a name. Was asking about can you make this recipe chocolate? And we are going to marble this. You're going to see me make some chocolate out of this in a second, actually. But you can definitely. And usually, like let's say I was making the whole batter chocolate. A good typical kind of rule of thumb is I take a quarter of the amount of flour and trade that for cocoa powder, and that usually does a good job of turning any better chocolate. You could also add in things like espresso extract to kind of deepen that chocolate flavor. You could add some chocolate chips into the mix. But a quarter the amount of flour as cocoa is usually a good option for the whole batter. I'm going to marble some later, so you'll see me play with cocoa powder for that as well. All right, let me give this a quick rinse for later. And then we're going to talk about mix-ins. Come on, say something. We're done. Okay. We'll need that paddle. All right, so in terms of mix-ins, and depending on how you want to do this, now we're going to probably portion into the pan first, and then I'm going to dot in some flavorings. If you prefer, if you have any sort of like disposable bowls or even disposable cups, you can divvy up your batter evenly into 8 sections, let's say, and then you can actually like stir things in really nice and evenly. If you're like a shortcut baker like me, I'm just going to do it in the pan. But you can divvy it up, and especially if you're adding things like shredded carrots or little mashed banana or nuts or things like that, you can separate it into separate bowls and really mix them in nicely. And carob powder is almost like cocoa. It's, you know, it's like less of a, if you're, you know, like to be fair, like this isn't really like a vegan recipe or anything like that. I would say I would always go with cocoa powder over carob. I think the flavor of carob is just a little bit more fruity. It's almost like it's like a raw cocoa powder with like very fruity notes to it, not like a true dark cocoa. And I do always use like a very dark cocoa when I work with cocoa powder. If you're in the supermarket, something like Hershey's Special Dark, you want something that's really deep in color and flavor. So the darker the cocoa, I think typically the better the result there. That's so funny, chocolate stout. I was just talking to somebody about St. Patrick's Day desserts, and we were talking about chocolate stout cupcakes. So I'm right there with you. And we're also going to talk about soaks for the loaf cakes. And something like stout would be great as a soak as well. So you can really do that. I'm going to spray these just with Pam. And again, I'm having the recipe. I'm only baking 4. So I'm only spraying half my pan. But if you're doing the full recipe, you're going to go ahead and spray your entire pan just to make sure it's really nonstick. And your oven should be preheated to 350 at this point. So if you are baking along, just go ahead and take a minute and preheat your oven. But now to portion this out, and I sort of talked about, and I'll show you one just to show you what I'm talking about. When I bake these, they do dome a little bit. So I get like a nice dome, and it does kind of spread out. If you like a really even loaf that just kind of evens out really nice and perfectly, do 10 instead of 8. Save a little bit of your batter and bake 2 extra. because these are a little bit on the higher side. So if you don't love that, I like the way it looks when I slice it like this because I think it's cute with like a little muffin top. But if you don't like that, then do 10 instead of 8. So just a heads up on that one. But I do use a scoop to portion. So this is like a nice scoop. I'm just going to go ahead and get it in. So right now my batter is only vanilla. So we're going to play with it a little bit. I'm just going to do some even scoops until I get down to the bottom. And for one of them, I'm going to save a little batter to do my marble. That's a nice thick batter. Whenever you're measuring flour, if you find that your cakes maybe end up a little bit, I know, I like the dome too. If your batters are like a little bit inconsistent, always make sure that you're really spooning and leveling your flour when you measure, because that really does change the consistency of your baked goods so much. I would say that and the temperature of your butter are like the two biggest issues that can arise. All right, so I saved just a little bit in the bowl to make a marble, but the rest were good to go. So while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and marble this first. So whenever you're adding something like a dry ingredient, like I want to add a little bit of cocoa to this to make like a chocolate swirl situation, you do always want to balance with an equal amount of liquid. So if I'm going to add, let's say, I don't know, about a teaspoon or so of cocoa, here I've got a half teaspoon here, do another one. I also want to add a teaspoon's worth of either water or coffee or something to balance the additional dry ingredients we just added. If I don't do that, I'm going to end up with these very sort of like rubbery marbles running through. And I just lose out on that tenderness of the cake. So you always want to make sure you balance. With spices, it's less of a problem because you're only adding, let's say, like a quarter teaspoon or a half teaspoon. Not such a big deal. But a larger quantity, like a teaspoon's worth of dry ingredients in this tiny amount of batter, can really throw off the ratio of our batter. You can see that's nice and chocolatey. You could also add an extra pinch of salt to this if you want to. But you can see I just have this nice chocolatey batter that I can now use to marble. Yes, and I did, no, sorry, yes, I did have the batter. In case you missed that, if anybody missed that at the beginning, I already made 4 earlier, and I just did not want to eat so many cakes. But if you're baking the whole recipe, you will have this whole pan full at this point, yes. All right. So depending on how you like to do this, I've got all this chocolate situation. Maybe I'm going to marble a couple of them. And to do that, you could just take a spoon and just sort of dot it in. I want it to kind of marble all the way through, so I'm going to add some over here, some over there. And once I've got it dotted in, you don't want to overdo it, but just a nice little swirly mabob through. Try not to overdo the swirl. It's really tempting to just like keep stirring, but just like one quick swirl, a little bit over there, a little bit over here, really does the job. You don't really need to overdo it. Settle it out. Yeah, you can always balance your cocoa powder either with water. That's the easiest. That's fine. Or you can use something like coffee if you have some brewed coffee hanging around. That would be good too. Now to flavor the rest. Now theoretically, if I was going to do, let's say like a lemon poppy or something like that, I could add some lemon zest in here. I could add some poppy seeds. And actually I might do that. That sounds fun. So we'll do some lemon zest. And again, if you don't like mixing in the pan, you know, which can be kind of silly if you're doing like 8 different flavors. Disposable cups or bowls. That's like a nice, easy way of really getting your flavorings in without making like a whole mess everywhere. But I kind of like this. It's kind of fun. And same goes for something like shredded carrots, coconut, bananas. You kind of divvy it up and have some fun. But you are really adding these flavorings to by eye. So just as much as you think looks like a good amount, especially something like carrots. keep in mind anything like carrots or bananas or diced apples or berries, they do add a little bit of moisture to your batter, so don't overdo it. If you're looking for like a true carrot cake, I would go for like a true carrot cake recipe that is formulated specifically for that. But if you're just adding, like a tablespoon or so of carrots, shredded carrots, or even 2 tablespoons, that's definitely fine. I like the idea of flavoring them individually. Yeah, totally. Do poppy seeds add flavor? Just a little. They do add like that little crunch, so a little bit of flavor and texture. Um, yeah, but I would say really more for the look of it. Oh, and I do have some blueberries. So something like blueberries, I know everyone sort of thinks like, oh, you got to toss it in flour before you add it. In this particular case, because this is such a thick batter, you can just kind of dot these in. And that's really nice and easy and fun. These are just frozen blueberries. Just use them straight from the freezer so they don't color my batter all purpley. But you can use fresh fruits, fresh berries, anything that you like would be good. Dehydrated strawberries from a lemonade. Yeah, totally. Well, it's funny. So you could use the strawberries. Either you could grind them up and use them to make a really pretty strawberry glaze. That would be really fun. Um, or you can chop them up and swirl them into your batter, and that would be good too, for sure. All right, so at this point, these are ready to bake. I'm not worried too much if they're perfectly even or anything like that. I'm just going to pop them in the oven. They're going to kind of dome out and spread out a little bit. They take about 25 to 30 minutes, and then they'll be ready to go. What do you think? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to get these in 350. I have some that I already made. I'm going to put this aside. And I have sort of like a variety pack of options here. We're going to have some fun with decorating these. All right, I'm going to wash out my bowl to make the buttercream really fast. And you do want to make sure that you don't over bake your loaf cakes. I know it's really tempting, and a lot of times, like definitely I learned it and other people learned, to really make sure that when you put a toothpick in the center, any sort of cake tester in the center, it should really come out clean. But the truth is that even a few moist bits are better than clean. If you go to the point where your cakes are so dry that that toothpick is just coming right out and there's nothing on it, you're missing out on some of that moisture that makes cakes so deliciously soft and tender. So just really try not to overbake them. You'll notice that they've got that browning around the edge a little bit, but they are really soft and tender in the middle. You always want to do that spring back test. Make sure they sort of bounce back as you poke them. If you touch and you feel like, oh, it's a little bit dense or heavy in the middle, maybe you test and there's a little bit of wet batter, leave it for a couple more minutes. But otherwise, I always try to err on the side of just baking only as much as you need to. And that's really going to extend the life of your baked goods, past that initial day or two with that additional moisture in the mix. All right. So before we get too deep into this, let's make our buttercream first. So I'm just making a classic American style buttercream. Let's turn this way, get some extra space. An American style buttercream is definitely the easiest of all the buttercreams. So really good for loaf cakes because we don't want to take too much time making crazy frostings or anything like that. But my butter is nice and at room temperature. And we sort of talked about, I forget what class it was in, but if you talk about the temperature of your butter, now room temperature butter, you should be able to kind of press in and it should push down and leave an indent, but you shouldn't be going all the way through. If your butter is so soft, let's say it's like the middle of summer and it's greasy looking and you press it and it's just like smushing everywhere, it's a little too soft. And what'll happen is if you then add to your buttercream recipe whatever liquid is called for, like milk, in the normal quantity, your butter is already so soft, it's hydrated your sugar so much that you don't need all that additional liquid. So if you're adding milk to your recipe and you're saying, why is my buttercream so soft or soupy? Usually it's the temperature of your butter that's causing that to happen. So I'm just going to beat this up for a second. I can also go ahead and get it in vanilla at this point, or anything else that you like. All right. And if you're making this, you can keep going. You can keep going until your butter is really nice and aerated and fluffy. That's going to increase the volume of your buttercream. But I'm just going to go ahead with it because we're here in class. I don't want to make you wait. But confectioner sugar is going in. I tend to do it in two parts just to kind of keep everything nice and clean. We don't want like a big sugar cloud happening. And you can add in a little bit of your milk at this stage as well, just to kind of hydrate it a little bit. And I always, whenever I'm making frosting, whatever liquid I'm adding, whether it's milk or any sort of flavoring that's in liquid form, you always start with less. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. So always good to start with less than what's called for and work your way up as you need to. Oh, this is a Breville mixer. Yeah, this Breville, it's been with me for a while, and I feel like it's on its last legs, which makes me very sad. But this is like, it's such a good size. I have a KitchenAid that's like a 7-quart, and sometimes it's just so big. And here in class, like we usually make small batches, and this I believe is either a 5-quart or a 6-quart. But it's a Breville, and I just love it. It's like my favorite mixer. All right, so I added the rest of my powdered sugar. I added a little bit of milk. I'm gonna just keep an eye as it mixes, see if it needs a little bit more milk as it goes. If you hear the mixer starting to struggle, it's always a good sign it needs a little bit more liquid. And then as soon as it looks like a nice sort of pasty, smooth, creamy mix, that's when we're really just gonna beat it up and give it some fluffiness. You can add in some salt to this as well. I was working with salted butter, so I skipped the additional salt in this one. But you can definitely add a little bit of salt to balance that sweetness, especially if you're working with unsalted butter. Now I'm just going to raise the speed a bit. All right. We have a nice smooth buttercream. Look at this. Yum, yum. And this, I left it on the thicker side. You can see it's a little bit on the thicker side because I want it to be pipeable. If you really want to spread this out, you can even thin this with a touch more milk if you want to. But I like a nice thick texture when I'm going to be piping. That's usually helpful. And we are going to make one more thing, which is a simple glaze to glaze some of these. So I'm going to move this up. And for a glaze, you're also working with confectioner sugar, but this time all we're adding is just the liquid. I don't have any butter in the mix or anything like that. All I have is confectioner sugar, and I'm just adding whatever liquid I choose, whether it's milk, buttermilk, lemon juice, coffee, fruit puree. You get anything goes here with glaze. Any liquid you want, you're going to add it by eye just to get to the right texture. So this is like 2-ingredient glaze. Couldn't be easier. And all you do is mix until it comes together. So I have some lemon juice. I'm definitely going to need more lemon juice than this, but I'm going to go ahead and then I'll go grab some more. And you can see it's just starting to hydrate at the bottom. And same rule as when you're making frosting. You always want to start with less. You can always add more. But all we're doing is just transforming this from powdered sugar based into just a pourable glaze. So I'm just mixing to combine. And this is like a quick and easy lemon glaze you could put on danishes, you could put on muffins, loaf cakes. You can see it's starting to kind of pool in the center. Really mix it up. So this, I'm sort of eyeballing. Again, it's only 2 ingredients, so you can really use any quantity. So I was sort of aiming to have enough to glaze like 2 cakes or so. I'm definitely going to have some extra. But I started with half a cup of powdered sugar. And I'm just adding lemon juice just to get the right consistency. And pour some more in here. So you don't even really need measurements on this one. What we're looking for is just a texture more than anything. You can see it starting to smooth out a little bit here. And I want to be able to kind of lift this up and drizzle it, but I want it thick enough that it's not going to melt like right into my cake. Although that could be pretty sometimes too, but you can see this is like, it's pourable. It makes a nice even stream, but it's also on the thicker side. I don't want to say glue consistency, but in a way, in a way, we're sort of looking for it to be like glue. That's kind of what we're looking for. That's the consistency we want. Now, if for some reason, let's say you added too much lemon juice or milk or whatever liquid you're using, if you're like, oh, this is too thin, you can go ahead and just add a little bit more confectioner's sugar and mix it in just until it's thick enough. And a good way to test is to just take a little bit, and you could put a little bit on your loaf cake just as like a tester and see, does it melt in? Does it sit on top? What happens to it? And then when you're done, you could just brush that off and it's good to go. And you could use water instead of lemon juice. Yeah. Yeah. Worst case scenario, I find like whatever liquid you're adding, you want to add flavor. So even something like milk, even if it's 2% milk or anything you have on hand or a plant-based milk, it does just give it like a little extra richness. Something like water, you really just taste the powdered sugar. So that's the downside to water, but in a pinch, you can absolutely just use water as well. That would be fine. And add like a little bit of vanilla or something to it, just for a little bit of extra flavor. All right, so you can see this glaze is looking pretty good. So we're good with that. I'm going to just take that off. You could add a pinch of salt to this as well. Any other flavorings you like. But it is very tasty. It's amazing how lemon juice and powdered sugar just make a very lovely mix. All right, so at this stage we can decorate. So I do have some that I already made. This one is a lemon, vanilla. I have chocolate chip and I have blueberry. So we can kind of decorate this as we like. And I thought the buttercream will do a chocolate and vanilla swirl on this one. We could do a glaze on these two. We could do maybe like some flower piping on this one. We used Russian tips in a class a while ago, so I thought that would be fun. So I grabbed one of the Russian tips for today. But we can have like a lot of fun with this. So let's start with something really easy. Let's just do a lemon situation. So we're doing a standard lemon loaf cake. And it is nice too. You could even do like a little bit of lemon peel and do little strips of lemon peel. It's kind of fun also to do like a thin slice of lemon. Do a couple of those. Take any seeds out. Let's just remove that guy. And if you have a slice of lemon like this, you could just cut a notch about halfway through, just like that. And then you could just take that and give it a twist. And that's like a really lovely way to just top a little loaf cake. So before we do that, let's drizzle in some of our glaze. So depending on how you like your glaze, you can drizzle flat all over the cake and cover the whole top. Or on one of them, we're just going to drizzle back and forth and do a little bit of like a little back and forth option there. But don't do too much that it kind of like cascades all over the place, but just enough that it coats the cake and kind of drips down the sides a little bit, and it will kind of smooth out as it sets. Can add a little bit more over here. See, it just kind of like evens out really nicely. You get like little drips down the side. And while it's wet, I'm going to go ahead and just stick with that poppy seed situation. Add a little bit of my poppy, just as decoration. And we'll add our lemon twist. And you always want to do things like this when your glaze is wet, so it's going to stick to it. So just a really cute, simple lemon pound cake. So that's like one quick and easy option there. Now, if we want to have a little fun, and blueberry and lemon does go very nice together, instead of doing glaze all over, we can kind of let it drip off our spoon a little bit there. You could also use a piping bag, but you could just go back and forth all the way down. Add a little bit more if you want to. I have some powdered sugar here as well. Can add something like some sliced strawberries. And it's nice to do the fresh fruits if, let's say, you're serving this in like an outdoor gathering and you're making like a very fancy like tea time or something like that. If you're storing these for long-term storage, the fresh fruits are less ideal because you're going to have to kind of worry about how well they're standing up to the elements along the way. Maybe some pistachios can be really fun. A little dusting of powdered sugar if you want to. A little final flourish there. And so that's another alternative in terms of glazing. You could just kind of make it really fresh and fun. Add some blueberries to the top. Yeah, so if you're not doing fresh fruits, you can store these at room temperature for sure. And they'll last, if they're well wrapped, I would say at least 3 or 4 days. Longer than that, I usually pop things in the freezer for longer storage. But if you do add fresh fruits to the top, especially things like lemon slices and things like that, it's best to refrigerate them and then bring them to room temperature before you eat them. That way their texture will be nicely intact. Now for these two, we're going to do buttercream. So let's scoot this over a bit. And we're going to add our buttercream to our piping bags. Move this glaze. So half this buttercream I'm going to turn chocolate. And actually not half, because some I'm going to turn pink as well. So we're going to have a nice springtime mix. And it's fun, especially when you're making mini cakes and things like that, to do as many different flavors as you can. And it's always just so impressive and fun. But so depending on what you like, we're going to use Russian tips for one, going to use a star tip for another, but you could also use a petal tip, a ruffle tip, anything you feel. I've got some piping bags. I'm just going to divvy this up to make a couple of colors. I dyed this one accidentally. What's it called? Coming soon. Next week we have, or actually not next week, for Easter we have a class with eggs, with dyed eggs in buns. And I accidentally dyed my silicone bowl. So if you're wondering why it's pink, it's from the Easter eggs. What are your thoughts around adding food coloring, oil-based or water? So for these, I'm using gel colors. Whenever you're working with buttercream, I definitely always recommend gel colors. These are just going to give you the most potent color. But yeah, anything you have will work. That is fine. What else do I need? I need a green, I need a chocolate, I need a vanilla, and a pink. Oh, that's it. Okay. Perfect. So I am using gel color. So this is like the satin ice. I have a green for my leaves. I'm just going to add a drop. Mix it in, see what we get. Hold on, I got to press the chat down. There we go. How long would leftover buttercream last in the fridge? Leftover buttercream, I would say about a week in the fridge. Sometimes longer. But to keep it really fresh, I would say about a week. I'm going to actually leave this really pastel today since we're doing like the springtime vibe. You're better with chunks of cream cheese. Oh no. Beat it up a little bit more. I will say, that's not the worst thing in the world. You're going to have like little rich pockets of fat kind of running throughout. In a way, it could be fun. But if you can beat it up a little bit, let it stand at room temperature just to make sure that cream cheese has a chance to warm up. Give it about 10 minutes at room temperature and then maybe just beat it again really quickly. That should help. Worst case scenario, you could always strain them out, but I think always better to have some extra cream cheese than no cream cheese at all, And the buttercream can be left out of the fridge, yeah. So American style buttercream, if you wrap it really well, I would say like 2 or 3 days at the most. I don't know if I've ever left it at room temperature longer than that. And if it is summertime, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. But if you are working with it in a cooler temperature, then you can leave it at room temperature. So for my green, I've got this fun leaf tip. That's going to make some leaves. I'm just going to go ahead and trim the top off. I'm going to put my green in this bag. Let's get a drinking glass here to help us. There we go. Mhm. I'm only working with like a tiny bit of green. I didn't do much. And now for our Russian tips. So if you didn't see that class, and now I'm totally forgetting which class that was, if anybody remembers. But the Russian, oh, it was for Valentine's Day. It was the heart cake. But Russian tips are so fun. These floral piping tips, you just pipe out like a perfect flower and put that in. And I'm going to do half white and half pink in my bag for that. And so for these tips, it's fun to kind of feed it in sideways a little bit, or you could paint the bag. I can't remember if we did that last time or not, but you can kind of paint the exterior of the bag in one color and add a little bit of another color in the middle, or you could do them side by side, which is probably what I'm going to do right now. And then you get flowers that are like a little swirled in color, which can be really nice. I'm going to add a little bit of white to this side and sort of work it down. And I don't know how much of that we're going to get in the mix, but it might swirl a little bit on the way down. You're painting the bag. Oh, nice. Sweet. Yeah, you can definitely paint the bag as well. All right, so we got one. We've got two. Now we're going to chocolate some of this and vanilla some of the rest. I've got a star piping tip for my other one. This is it's like a closed star, but you can use an open star. You can use any type that you have. Just make sure it's a little bit on the bigger side to cover the cakes nicely. I'm going to add a little vanilla on one side. And then same deal, same way we sort of chocolated our batter. I'm going to chocolate our buttercream the same way. I've got a little buttercream. I've got my cocoa. And again, whatever amount I add of cocoa, I want to balance that with a little bit of liquid. Of course, with buttercream, you want to be careful not to go overboard with your liquid. So I'm just going to add a little bit to start, and I can always add more. And I'm just going to work it in to create a chocolate buttercream. Just slow and steady mix it in here. Could do this with the paddle also. This is pretty thick, so I'm going to add a little bit more milk just to balance it out. Should be good. Can also put in two smaller bags. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that will work with the Russian tips. Yeah, for sure. It's funny with the Russian tips, it's like more fun because you're piping so many flowers out of one bag. It's fun that they sort of change, you know what I mean? If you have two bags in your larger bag, they all come out really uniform. Like you'll get, pink on one side, white on the other. But if you kind of swirl the buttercream in your bag, you get like all of these unique flowers. Like some of them are going to be more pink, some are only going to be pink, some will be only, pink with a little white, some will be more white. So it kind of adds like more variety. So I don't know, I kind of like that in a way. But yeah, absolutely. You can also just use two bags for sure. I thinned it a little too much. I'm adding just a touch more cocoa powder. The Russian tips, I believe, I think they're Wilton. I have to look that up. If anyone knows which brand the Russian, I would check on the website. Check on the Michaels website. I don't remember if they're Wiltons. They might be. All right, I got vanilla. I've got chocolate. So I've got a fun swirl going on here. All right, so we're going to decorate our last two. So let me put this aside. Got some powdered sugar just for fun. If we need it, I have some mini chocolate chips. I've got my loaf cakes. Let's take these back over here. Come with me. All right. Chocolate chips. So I've got my chocolate. Let's do the chocolate first. And you can, if you want to test it, like I kind of want to see what I'm working with here. You could test a little bit on a plate or in a bowl. Right now I've got like all chocolate coming out, so I'm just going to extrude a little bit back into my bowl until I get my vanilla peeking through. All right, it'll come out eventually. So I have chocolate chips in this guy. So I'm going to do a chocolate vanilla situation. And this could be pretty or it could be really muddy. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it's kind of fun. Fun swirl situation. Could also do rosettes all over would be fun. I got some minis, some little mini chocolate chips. Could do like a melted chocolate drizzle. And then for my flowers, same deal. You could give it a test. See if I have a spatula. I do. Just to see what it's coming out like. Got like a pretty pink flower. And at some point we should start to get a little white also. There it is. So cute. Now, if your buttercream isn't holding the shape of the flower, it might be a little bit too loose. You could chill it for a couple of minutes. Kind of a fun spring bouquet. Gonna add some leaves. They're kind of fun. Little flowers. You could also add some different types of flowers. You could take a star tip, add some little rosettes in there. It's kind of fun. It's like a fun springtime bouquet. Like that's cute. Let's plate them up. Could just a little bit. Oh, they're kind of cute. I like these. But yeah, they could be really creative, really fun. To add edible flowers. Kind of mix them up however you feel. So we've got our lemon, our chocolate. Put him over there. A pretty floral vanilla. Our berrylicious. Just like a fun mix. Let's slice into one. See what we're working with here. Which one should I slice into? That's the question. Maybe the chocolate. I'm a chocolate girl. Right in the middle. Mm. How long will the not fresh berry cakes last? I would say if you just put berries, like if you bake berries in, let's say like the blueberry, they'll last, same deal. I would leave them at room temperature for up to 2 days or so. Longer than that, I would refrigerate. But they're just really fluffy. They're like a dense. So somebody was talking about for cupcakes. They are definitely denser than cupcakes, more toward pound cake than cupcakes. But they're just really lovely and very tender, very buttery. You get a little bit of the flavor of the cream cheese to kind of balance it. Super fun. Thanks, Lisa. They're very yummy. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for joining us today. Next week, we have, I believe it's Maritosi. Maritosi are these like really amazing Italian buns with like pastry cream in the middle. So delicious. So definitely come by for that. I know. I wish you guys were here in person too. That'd be great. Yeah, and cannoli class is going to be great. I love cannolis. Homemade cannolis are the best. So definitely come by for that as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Laura. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's so great. Well, I'm glad. Bring your friends. Come back for more. Thank you guys so much. Happy baking. I hope you bake these. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you.